Lesson 26 Project Help Video. A drawbridge is a bridge over a body of water, typically a river or channel, that can be raised to make room for taller boats to travel beneath it. The Queen is relatively sure that they can use the same principles involved in raising a drawbridge in order to raise the two-headed dragon out of the way of the opening day ceremonies for the kingdom. The Queen decides to study a drawbridge over the southern river in the kingdom, which can be raised to its maximum height when the angle of elevation is theta. Assume that the angle is in standard position and is between 0 and 90 degrees. So in the bottom right here we have a picture of what our drawbridge looks like. When the bridge is fully raised, tangent of theta equals 3/4. What is secant theta? Write your answer as a fraction in simplest form. So we first need to look at the identities that we've learned and see which one has both tangent in it and secant in it. So the Pythagorean identity that has both of them in it is 1 plus tangent squared theta equals secant squared theta. So then I'm going to take my information I was giving of the fact that tangent theta equals 3/4. I'm going to plug that in for tangent theta. So now I have 1 plus, so instead of tangent squared theta, I'm going to have 3/4 for tangent theta. 3/4 squared equals secant squared theta. So now I'm going to do 3/4 squared. So I have 1 plus, remember when you square a fraction that you square the top and you square the bottom. So 3 squared gives us 9. 4 squared gives us 16. And then we still have that it equals our secant squared theta. So now in order to add 1 plus 9 over 16, we need to have a common denominator. So our least common denominator is going to be 16. So I'm going to change 1 into 16 over 16 plus our 9 over 16 still equals secant squared theta. Now I'm going to go ahead and add here on the right. So I'm going to add my tops together. 16 plus 9 gives me a 25 over, I still have the same denominator of 16, equals secant squared theta. So now I need my secant theta all by itself. So in order to get rid of this squared, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So when I take the square root of 25 over 16, I'm going to take the square root of 25 and the square root of 16. So the square root of 25 is 5 over the square root of 16 is 4 equals secant theta, because when I take the square root of a square, it cancels out. So secant theta, which is what it's asking me for, is 5/4. It wants it in the fraction in simplest forms. Well, I can't simplify 5/4 anymore. So my answer is that secant theta equals 5/4. Refer to your answer to the previous question, what is cosine theta? So in our previous question, we found that secant theta equals 5/4. If you look at your reciprocal identities, you know that cosine theta equals 1 over secant theta. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute in what I know secant theta is. So we have cosine theta equals 1 over 5 divided by 4. Now I'm dividing by a fraction. So remember that when we divide by a fraction, that's the same as taking the top, flipping the sign of division to multiplication, and then taking the reciprocal of the bottom, or flipping it over. So we now have 4/5 instead of 5/4, and then multiplying that. So I get 4/5. So cosine of theta is 4/5. Refer to your answer to the previous question, what is sine of theta? So if I look at my Pythagorean identities, I know that cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta equals 1. And we found in our last problem that cosine of theta equals 4/5. So we have 4/5 squared plus sine squared theta equals 1. So I'm going to go ahead and square my 4/5. So 4 squared gives me a 16. 5 squared gives me a 25. Plus a sine squared theta equals 1. I want my sine squared theta to be by itself, so I'm going to subtract 16 over 25 from both sides. So I now have sine squared theta equals 1 minus 16 divided by 25. So I need a common denominator, so my common denominator is going to be 25, so this is the same as 25 over 25, because that's the same as 1 minus 16 over 25. So now I have sine squared theta equals, when I do 25 minus 16 on the top, I get 9 over, I keep my denominator of 25. So now I have sine squared, I want sine. So I have that it's squared, so I need to take the square root of both sides. So I now have sine theta equals the square root of 9 is 3, square root of 25 is 5. So sine theta equals 3/5. That is it for your lesson 26 project help video.